Right, what's up, Dragon Brood? Duskmourn's around the corner, but that means there's actually older cards that you might want to get ahead of time, whether that's to buy them, craft them, whatever, to kind of just be ready for when Duskmourn drops, because there's going to be a lot of old cards that got better because of the new set. So let's talk about them. Now, first things first, there's going to be a lot of new enchantments, and I think that's going to be a recurring thing that comes up throughout this video, that you're going to need ways to deal with those or ways to take advantage of them, because rooms happen to be enchantments. Now, all that being said, how are we going to deal with these? There's two cards in particular that I think you should probably consider playing. The first we're going to talk about is Requisition Raid, which I've started putting into a couple of decks lately, because you already have some decks that are big that are playing artifacts like Urbrass Forge and lots of enchantments like Caretaker's Talent, so those are out there. But again, with all the rooms and everything else existing, this becomes a pretty good catch-all card, and you don't have to worry about filling other slots because it's pretty flexible. And for 2 mana, you can get rid of what you want, or for 3 mana, you get rid of 2 things, and then for 4 mana, you can also pump your team, so why not? But the other card I want to talk about is Tranquil Frillback. Now, some of us have already been playing this for a minute, but if you haven't, I would recommend considering it, because this comes with the added ability of being able to destroy an artifact or an enchantment. Again, probably a room, but also lets you get rid of graveyards, and as we've seen, this set has a lot of Delirium in there, and we're going to talk about some other graveyard stuff in a minute too. Though before we do that, we're going to talk about some of those new lands, right? We've looked at them and people said, hey, these are really good. Do they have any benefits over other things? Like, now, we're talking about new cards here, but why do I bring them up? Well, because you need other basic land types in your decks to help these function. Well, we do have a very good other set of lands that happen to have basic land types on them, and those are the Surveil lands. So if you're looking to take advantage of those new lands, which I think are totally reasonable, I don't even know what we call these yet, but the Surveil lands are definitely playable. They've been finding their way into more lists slowly but surely, and if you are going to be trying to do the Delirium stuff, this is another way to put stuff in your graveyard. So if you haven't crafted some of these yet, you probably should consider them if they're in the colors that you're planning to play a bunch of. Now, we still have vehicles in Standard, but not a ton of really good ones. But we do have a couple of mounts, or saddle creatures, if you will, that you really should consider playing. We're really going to be talking about the Caustic Bronco, the Tumblewag, and probably even our favorite 2/4 mount that lets you reuse some of these crazy cards. But it's not even really because of the reuse of anything that we want. We really want to just be able to mount these cards. Mostly because there's some new survival cards, particularly Kona, and I believe Rip is the 4 mana one. Those are probably going to see the most play of them, and these are really good, right? One lets you just keep your hand loaded, the other lets you just put things into the battlefield for free, and who knows, maybe they're in the same deck, I don't even know yet. But saddling is actually one of the easiest ways to get these tapped, and you get a bonus ability usually off of the thing that you're saddling. And you don't want to necessarily play bad cards just to make use of these survival things, but these cards are all actually useful on their own. So yeah, why not go ahead and craft them and have them available? Or if you can pick them up now on the cheap, I would probably snag a couple if they don't cost you very much at your local store. Yeah, alright, so back to that graveyard stuff we were talking about. I actually went through and found a list of, like, you don't just want to play anything that gets rid of stuff in the graveyard. You want to play the best things that you can. And there's actually a few. And like the Intrepid Paleontologist, this is good if you just want to ramp up and have extra mana to do things, but also let you remove stuff from the graveyard, and possibly reuse some dinosaurs if you happen to be playing them. Then there's also Keen-Eyed Curator. This is one I'm actually a big fan of. Not only can it remove stuff from the graveyards, it actually becomes a 7/7. And on top of that, if people are trying to do Delirium stuff, they're going to be playing a bunch of different types of things to have into the graveyard, which makes it a lot easier to get this to a 7/7. So this was a weird card that was almost like an early plant for this set, because the way it grows is actually being the antithesis, I guess, of an actual other deck type that's trying to come around, which is kind of awesome. And then we also have Lord Skitter, which is just a good card already, and we play a lot of it. Now, unlike the other two can be used at instant speed, so you probably want to lean towards those, but if you happen to be in black, Lord Skitter is actually totally fine. But there's another card I think people forgot about that we haven't had a good reason to really play it, but Rest in Peace. This is one of those cards that I think people forget about because it hasn't been hugely necessary, and it appeared on that like big score subset or whatever, but it is actually standard legal right now, so yeah, we're going to be playing some Rest in Peace. Probably. Don't be surprised if this card gets you if you're doing some graveyard shenanigans. Oh, quick side note, a bunch of you watch the videos that aren't subscribed, and you probably want to because just like last season, we're going to do like cards you should craft, cards you shouldn't craft, a bunch of decks with like new card ideas. So if you want to get all that, and you want to make sure you don't miss it, remember to subscribe, hit the bell. Let's get back to the rest of this video. All right, I think it was kind of a requirement that I mentioned Zur in this type of video. Like, this is a card that it had a minute in Standard where it was kind of a real serious part of the metagame for maybe about 3 months or so, 4 months-ish, and then kind of quickly fell off. But the card is still actually playable. Now, it had been in some type of versions of, I guess, Domain, so you could take advantage of the ley line and stuff like that. But ultimately, this gets a lot better, again, because of rooms. All those rooms happen to be enchantments. So that means this could make you a very large pile of 6, 7, 8, 9 power creatures, and you could do some really crazy stuff. So, not sure if this card's going to see a ton of play, but it definitely gets a whole hell of a lot better at the very least. And we have a bunch of other things that also care about enchantments on top of that, so this could just be one more key player in those enchantment decks, just to give you another way to get across the finish line if nothing else. You could splash 1 or 2 of these. So yeah, while this might even not be the core card of a deck, it might actually still just be really good as another option. So yeah, another thing I wanted to talk about here are the Overlords, right? These have been kind of the hyped cards because they're impending abilities, so they trigger and then later on they come into play or actually become creatures and then can attack and do their thing. But I don't know if we should overly focus on them. I do think they will appear in the metas in various forms, but I don't really know how important or impactful they're going to be. They're good cards, but I don't know if decks are going to try to play 4 of them because they're going to try to get the cheap impending cost, or if they just want 2 or 3, maybe they're going to try to reanimate them somehow. But if they are going to be impending, I mean, the ability is impending. I don't know how we're talking about this yet. But if they are going to be cast due to their impending ability, I think there's a couple of cards we need to consider. The first is Render Inert, right? It can just outright remove counters off of things. So if you're the one playing them, this is a way that you could just remove counters and then get the card ready to go. Same thing could be said of Glissa Sunslayer. Like, you can attack and then just remove counters off of a card. So that's another way to deal with these. So if you're already playing those colors, say you're playing the black one or the green ones, it's not too far of a leap to be able to play either of these cards that go with them. But then I started thinking, like, what if you actually want to go the other direction and stop your opponent from getting those into play? That brought me to a card like Bloated Contaminator, right? This is another one that's just a quality creature that has probably gone underplayed quite a bit unless you've been playing like mono green aggro, which is still playable. And you might actually pick up 1 or 2 things out of the set. But this actually can let you put counters back on these cards and just keep them at bay for another, who knows, 3, 4, 5 turns. So if these cards become a big part of the metagame, these are 3 cards you might want to consider whether you're playing them or playing against them. And you can still use other proliferate stuff against these as well. Okay, so I got to talk about a card that we all already hate, that really had a big moment in the sun and was annoying, and then sort of fell off and then kind of came back in the back toxic decks for a minute. But Venerated Rot Priest. This card, ugh. But it's actually decent, it's playable. Some people like the decks that include it because they're a little bit budget. Totally fine. But there's a new card called Enter the Enigma that probably is going to find their way into these decks. And if they're trying to punch through another toxic damage or whatever, or even just get that first one on you so they can start using the other proliferate cards, this is the way they might be able to do it. So again, this card's already played, and if you've been on the fence or maybe you've had this deck and you've been thinking about it but you weren't sure to commit, well, I got a couple of more tools in the set that actually make it a little bit more viable. Alright, so for these next few, we're going to get a little bit tricky. We're going to talk about Twining Twins, Parting Gust, and I had another one in my notes. Oh yeah, the new one, Splash Portal. Now, these obviously all have something in common, right? They're able to blink a card out and have it return. And on the surface, it's like, okay, we've already had some decks that have it or whatever. But think about this. Manifest Dread is going to be putting a lot of probably significant sized creatures face down. And if you can actually blink those out, well, they don't come back face down, they come back face up. So there's a real possibility that these types of cards could find their way into the meta. And if you're thinking about playing those style of decks, you're probably going to want some 4 to 6 cards in this vein or anything else that do something similar so that you can actually get those big monsters for cheap using those Manifest Dread abilities and then actually not just flipping the card out and into play, but actually using it as a protective spell as well, right? Your opponent might go to target them to try to kill them before they flip. You respond by blinking them. They come back either right then or at the end of turn, depending on the spell you use. And now you have an even bigger monster while costing your opponent a card. This is probably going to be some type of real strategy here. I don't know what it looks like yet, but these are definitely cards worth considering. So yeah, I guess it's worth mentioning the Overlords again, because we know those are good. And we got a couple of new demons that are quite large. One of them that has an insane ward ability. But all that being said, you want them into play cheaply, right? And we know about all the reanimator spells and stuff, but we also talked about multiple ways to remove graveyards. So maybe that's not the efficient way to do it. But there's a card, Smuggler's Surprise, that we've already been playing a little bit, especially on this channel. I think I made like 3 or 4 videos with it this season. Like, the card is still very good, and put your opponent on notice to also find another way to deal with these, that you may be putting multiples into play, well, not for free, but for 6 mana you get 2 them into play at instant speed, or for 7 mana you're even able to protect them for a turn, which is huge considering these have attack abilities or whatever that could go off on your turn. So lots of interesting stuff you can still do with Smuggler's Surprise, and we just added a whole round of, what, like 8 or 9 new big monsters that you can consider playing. Alright, so this next one, Agatha's Soul Cauldron. This card's already popular. If you haven't crafted it or bought it, don't know what to tell you. There's already been played in a bunch of stuff. Really popular in older formats. So on paper, this is probably still going to be pretty pricey to get your hands on. But I want to talk about it because of a couple things in Duskmourn. Not just that it can remove a creature from the graveyard, because we know about that. And again, there's a bunch of things that can do that. But there's actually a particular new card that works with this as well. That's Valgavoth's Faithful. Now, if you don't know what this actually lets you pay mana, sacrifice it, and return another creature from your graveyard. But if you can Agatha's Soul Cauldron, well, now everything you have that has a token has the ability to bring something else back from the graveyard. So this could be a pretty wacky combo to have together. I don't know if it is, but we already know Soul Cauldron's good, and this is just one more piece that allows it to do one more set of silly shenanigans. So just something I wanted to put on your radar in case you didn't know about it. Yeah, another interesting thing about this set, not just rooms, you know, as a whole across the board, there's a very big sub-theme, if you want to call it, of enchantments. Enchantments that come into play and do things, obviously the rooms, things that draw cards, glimmers that happen to be enchantments, a new card that lets you draw cards when enchantments enter the battlefield. I mention all of this to say there's a card that's been underplayed lately since it was part of another deck that sort of just fell off post-rotation, but Calyx, Guided by Fate. Now, this card's actually really damn good with a lot of cards from Duskmourn, because we have a bunch of auras that enchant things that make it a lot easier to get stuff across the finish line, some stuff that lets stuff get bigger, some stuff that gives stuff flying, some stuff that can make things unblockable. I think there's one of those, but we already had one of those. But being able to play all those alongside the rooms, alongside these glimmers, just like all kinds of things you could do to copy other creatures, enchantments, like, you could do some really silly things between those, the talents, like you name it, right? Lots of opportunity here. Like, imagine being able to, like, put an enchantment on a creature, you get to attack, it connects, you copy a talent that maybe gets to kill something or is putting extra counters next turn. Like, I don't know. There's a bunch of things you could possibly do here. And Calyx has a whole new set of options and things to copy. This could get out of hand in the very scary wrong situations. So another one that you may have forgotten about or not have wanted to consider buying or crafting or whatever, but don't be surprised if you see this pop up, because it has an opportunity to be a lot better with the opportunities it's getting in Duskmourn. The question I have now is, knowing all this, is there something that I missed? Like, do I need to do a part 2 or a part 3? Maybe, I don't know. Let me know if you even like these types of videos. I think this is only like the second set in a row I've done these for. But yeah, there's so many things that got better when I started looking through as I'm starting to put decks together that I figured this is stuff y'all need to know about. But I'm sure there's other things I forgot about or didn't mention or whatever, so let me know in the comments. Or did any of these surprise you or give you ideas? Because, you know, that's always positive too. But otherwise, check out my other stuff. Don't forget, we're going to be playing some Duskmourn with the streamer event. But that's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.